for dropping in, and welcome back to the Rex Reviews podcast. It's Lew and Kacie, joined by Kacie Day, and of course, the legendary TiborasaurusRex in the flesh. We've been discussing everything so far across the board here on the first ever podcast, and it's been a lot of fun so far, guys.
That is correct.
And I feel like we are just getting started onto really big, cool things here. Mm-hmm. And our last segment was really kind of the meat and potatoes of the show so far.
In terms of getting half a dozen lawsuits sent in the mail towards me, so.
Well, you got to get the ball rolling some direction, man.
Yeah, and it'll be all right. Controversy creates a crowd, doesn't it?
It does indeed.
There's a lot more conflict addicts probably than people who actually want to know my opinion. So it all works out in the end for viewers and stuff.
Haters make you famous.
That's true. That's true.
So now that we've progressed to this portion of the show, I want to share with you a quote from one of my favorite comedians of all time, a counterculture hero, a gentleman by the name of Bill Hicks.
Oh, man, I know that guy. He's funny.
Yeah, he
did push the envelope, though, Lou.
Oh, he did, and that's what I love the man for. I remember him doing one of his bits about why there aren't any positive drug stories on the news. Anytime you see drugs on the news, it's always these the kids that were high on acid and they tried to jump off a roof and fly, you know? And I remember him saying, well, those kids are stupid. You ever see ducks that fly, that jump off? No, they start from the ground. They take off from the ground if they want to fly. Fuck those kids. They deserve to die. They were stupid. And his quote that he ends that with is, wouldn't it be great to turn on the news someday and see the television reporter saying, today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. Here's Tom with the weather. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be a world that we lived in where you actually had some honesty in reporting and some search for deeper truth?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting commentary there from the Mr. Hicks, I have to admit. Yep.
Yeah. You ever taken acid?
I am not saying anything about taking acid because I wouldn't know about that.
No?
No, where am I going to get it from? I live in the middle of nowhere, dude.
Well, statute of limitations.
I did stare at a prairie dog for 6 hours, though. Does that count?
and it was probably one of the most earth-shattering experiences of your entire life, right?
Well, remember the cartoon The Simpsons? The TV breaks down one time and that Homer guy, he's the dad, the kind of doofus guy, the old, you know, and or something happens with the TV and he's like, well, turn something on. I'm starting to think. So they go and turn on the radio real quick before he can start thinking. Because I think that what a lot of people are scared of the most is quiet.
Oh.
What would happen if you'd start actually thinking about things around you? Bad things will happen. And I'm telling you, we're not only scared of it because we've been conditioned by our masters to be that way, but the human brain has incredible potential, really, to figure stuff out. And I think that humanity is really mostly suppressed by our own limitations and governors we've put on ourselves.
Yeah, it's our self-imposed laws and limitations that hold us back the most.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys know me, and like, I don't know if I'm not new agey or nothing, probably. I don't know if I'd fit in the Bible criteria or what, but I don't want to skirt the edge of heresy too much, but I do think a lot. I do think a lot for myself. And when if I'm even reading the scriptures, you know me, I like the Bible. I like the scriptures. I think Jesus is awesome. But, I still think at the same time too, because I think that whoever made us, man, would want us to think about stuff. Isn't contemplating him and how this works like part of the deal? Isn't that what's supposed to happen?
I was listening to a debate on Coast to Coast the other night, and nice catch.
Yeah, that's like a Gandalf move right there. Zika virus mosquito zoomed my head, so I did the old birdcage grab and grab. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah,
Slow
the Gandalf
motion.
grab. Or the Jedi.
The Gandalf grab.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, the guest on Coast to Coast the other night said that the creator, whatever you want to call him, her, it, definitely gave us free will because we have the capacity to make bad decisions. we have the capacity and ability to make bad decisions for ourselves. Like if I want, I could go sell everything I own and spend all that money on crack cocaine and, buy.
Yeah, I know someone who did that.
Yeah, buy hookers and do the whole 9 yards and just live it up for one final day. But boy, would it be a good one. So we have the capacity to make those decisions. We have the ability, and if we so choose it, we can do that, and we'll see the repercussions throughout our life. And that's free will, I think.
It's part of the learning experience, too. Sometimes it's hard to learn things without experiencing them.
But I think that's kind of where morality comes in. And you everybody has that feeling inside when they know they're doing something wrong. And there is that put into people. So although we do have freedom to choose what we will, I think that there is sort of a divine knowledge that you're straying from the path that you're supposed to be on, that you have a purpose, and that when you stray away from that, you get that feeling inside that something's wrong here. I'm not doing the right thing. And
the internal computer lights start flashing, warning, warning, warning. This is not productive to your spiritual or physical well-being. Exactly.
You're straying from the path you're supposed to be on. And although you can choose, how you go about getting there, you have that warning.
And typically, I think that if you want to summarize that whole morality situation, it's basically the common denominator behind constructive behavior, which is a mechanism which keeps us online with being constructive and advancing rather than self-destruction, which is when and the brain will tell us. I don't know if it's collective experience through epigenetic memory or what the heck it is happening, or spiritual energy, whatever it is, or God's whispering to us in our ear. It all you can all argue that it might even be the same thing, right? But I think that basically morality is helping the species maintain its cohesiveness as a unit of individual people all hooked together in one giant super species, which is us, right? Or what the Bible calls the church, a group of living stones all stacked seamlessly upon another and all that stuff. But I think that that's kind of the crux of the matter, is trusting that inner whisper of knowing, everyone's born with a conscience, right? And everyone knows when
we would like to think. No,
Go ahead.
You laugh, but that's an honest question. Before you can continue the discussion of whether or not we should listen to the voice, we have to determine whether or not everybody does have that voice, that little consciousness inside. We can't fairly assume that, can we?
I think we can. I think that here's a different way of looking at it. I think that it has to be a part of the human brain set, at least, in order to even survive. Otherwise, you would not breathe. You'd cease to breathe. Because breathing, respiration, all the blood would not pump in your veins if it wasn't for the genetic memory, instinctive nature of humans to self-preserve, right? And morality is a further extension in the consciousness of societal characteristics that keep us alive as a unit longer. So I think those are all intact, but I think that we sometimes suppress those. So some people have suppressed their conscious to a degree to where they might not hear it anymore. So some people might not hear it, but they burn themselves on it.
I agree with that. I think that any human being that was, how do I say this without being offensive, that was undefective in nature when they were created, I'll just put it that way, is going to have those natural abilities, because I think that's part of the human creation that was put into us, is to have that morality. However, I do think that as there are some handicaps with people, whether it's you can't walk or this or that, I believe
some people
that
are born crazy as hell. That's true.
Yeah, there is a moral incapacitation that is kind of like a handicap, and that's where you get those mental diseases.
Well, and that's interesting you bring that up, because actually you've zeroed in on one of the age-old mysteries of what is sin, what is original sin. And what that was is the original template was that we operated properly. We had our Homo sapien 1.1 system, whatever it was, and the original software was loaded into the computer, and we operated perfectly until that was overwritten by choice, because we chose to have knowledge of the other operating system, evil, good and evil. So we willingly allowed we took down the firewall mechanism and allowed that to overwrite a certain small portion, which created a defective program, which after that point added up to destructive nature, which was exactly what you just described, which is that handicap mechanism, which is a self-destructive pattern overriding the good pattern. And that doesn't always fall exactly in the same place. It doesn't seem like different people struggle with different things. Some people struggle with, substance abuse. Some people struggle with like punching people in the face. Some people struggle with cutting people's heads off. I mean, you look around the world and there's a lot of
destructive behavior.
There's bad stuff that happens on various levels. And you could argue that it's all equally the same bad. Because in the sum total of things, it's not helping us to survive, right? And so those things could be summarized in that degree. So,
and I think though the point to where it becomes, for me, in my belief, like where it becomes an actual like defect or handicap type deal, is when you don't have that moral feeling of it's wrong. Somebody who is like mentally defective in the form of moral guidance, like they do the wrong thing, yet they don't get that inkling.
You've hit another giant issue. So here's one that a guy gets all the time. We're talking about Rex's Bible study portion of the show, which is what we're getting into here now, apparently. And we're talking about, people ask about what is the unpardonable sin that was referenced in the Bible. And it was talked about, what is the unforgivable sin? Like, unless you commit this sin against the Holy Spirit, you're toast. You have zero chance. And everyone says, what is that? Because everyone doesn't want to commit that one, because that means it says in there that you are toast if you do this one. And all that means, if you say the Holy Spirit is bad, then you're toast. So like if I'm sitting here, like right now at this table, right, I'm going to do it. You ready? Oh man, the Holy Spirit's so terrible. I hate it. See, now, according to a lot of people, they think that that's what it's talking about. But in my opinion, what it's talking about is the Spirit is that witness, that genetic memory, whatever it is in your brain, that tells you what you're supposed to not do. And when we consciously overwrite that, and we go into the computer settings in our brain, and we go and turn off all the safety mechanisms, and we say, yeah, you know what? I know this is wrong, but I'm turning this one off now. I now choose to not even care. And you turn it off, and then you leave it off. And there's a certain amount of times where it'll prompt, and it'll come up. I'm using a computer analogy, right? So it'll blip, and it'll say, are you sure you want to hit this button? Yes. And then the next time you do that same thought pattern of destructive behavior, boom, it comes up again. Yes, I choose to overwrite. If you do that enough times, eventually that stuff don't pop up anymore. And all of a sudden, you are now actually unable to detect that you are now sinning, because you've consciously overwritten that pop-up mechanism, which was that now you've committed the unpardonable sin, because you consciously decided to not even know you're sinning on that issue, right? So once you are so burned on something to where you don't even know that it's wrong still, now you're in big trouble. And I don't think people look at this too scientifically too, and they say, oh, once it happens, it can never be fixed. It can always be fixed, but it takes a change in heart, you know what I mean? And you have to decide, you have to make a conscious decision. Okay, hey man, like I'm messed up. My life sucks, and I don't know why, but I'm guessing there's something I'm missing. Let's put the system back on recalibration mode, and let's take it back to the original operating system. Put the CD back in the drive or whatever it is, right? And have that thing like, okay, let's just like redo the program. And that's what happens. That's what a lot of religious people would consider salvation to be, right? Is where you reprogram the computer and say, okay, my system sucks. Let's override it with something more constructive. So I think that that's true, that some people have a handicap, a moral handicap. A lot of times, and it could, and I'm empathetic, people might actually be physically messed up in the brain too. They might not have that part of the brain developed, and they might be actually morally handicapped. But most of the time, it's an overwritten deal. And something happened where they consciously overrode that deal. Whether they be a fanatical person, like over in some country that might actually torture people to death and do all this terrible stuff, or if it be some kid sitting being a punk to his mom, or who knows what it is. I don't know. There's a million versions of it, right? But I think that's the sum total of that whole deal, is that we overwrite it on purpose, and we consciously And after a certain point, you can become morally handicapped. And this is why like mobsters and these torture guys and these mafiosos can be so ruthless, is because they've finally committed that unpardonable sin of saying, hey, you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm just going to do it anyways. And then once that happens, you unleash all Hades.
Well, and I do like the term morally handicapped, because I think that that's exactly what it is. You know, a lot of people would think, you know, turning off those morals, you know, you become like more powerful or you have more control over your life because you're not following this path. But, you know, being immoral is a handicap.
Yeah.
And I really believe that, because to do anything and build on anything, you kind of have to have that moral code, and that, you know, it's just the world was programmed a certain way.
And that's an interesting observation too, because like when you're talking about, it actually requires greater strength to perform life in an honorable way, because you are not selfishly thinking about your own path. Where like people who are morally handicapped are often tempted by things of the world, which say, hey, you can advance yourself for an extra 5 minutes if you do this. The right chemicals will squirt in their brain and you'll feel special for doing this immoral thing for like 5 seconds. Afterwards, the downer is way worse than the upper was. And now you are like worse off than when you started, and the destructive pattern begins. But to live life honorably, in a moral way, if you put it that way, is requires a greater strength, in my opinion. And that's why I respect guys who are like truly in that category, at least trying to be like, and none of us live up to that 100%, you know what I mean? But you're absolutely right. It is handicapped because they are not stronger. It is evidence that they are actually weaker because they have to go against the survival of the species as a whole to suit themselves.
Well, and it also kind of shows that they don't have it in themselves to get past that 5 minutes. You know, people who are immoral are looking for a quick fix, and it's because they need something every 10 minutes to bring them back up, to keep them going. Whereas somebody with a stronger moral value and moral code, you know, patience is a virtue, and things take time, and it shows that you have that durability to keep going. And so I think just in general, having a strong mind leads to, you know, a strong body and a strong life.
And to summarize what morality is, I mean, it's really for the advancement of the species as a whole. Because humans don't got equipped with giant, enormous, awesome claws or horns on our heads or like fire-breathing stuff like dragons got or any of this cool stuff. And we can't run 85 miles an hour like a cheetah, right? So we're basically weak critters. And the only way we advance ourselves is through our society and maintaining a cohesive unit amongst 7 billion of us to advance our technology to a point and our society structure to where we're still awesome as a huge unit. We have mastered the planet, dude. Yeah, hopefully we don't wreck it too bad here, but you know what I'm saying?
We've came a long ways to get where we are today, where we've got the capability to push buttons to launch bombs at each other.
Yeah. Well, it's... Oh, you just wrecked our whole little card house, man.
Well, I'm keeping it anchored over here.
But that's a feedback mechanism within the system that's like a really terrible nightmare that a guy never thinks of. It's like through the advancement of the species, you develop potential energy of awesomeness, potentially. But the responsibility factor increases the more collective knowledge you get. And if you want to build a hydrogen bomb and drop it on someone, if you want to build a hydrogen bomb to prevent World War III, like they did so far, that's a glorious thing. But once you start dropping on each other, all of a sudden, like, okay, well, that backfired. But that's with knowledge and with all that comes great responsibility.